Welcome to the Jiu Jitsu Oracle's ADCC over 99 kilogram division tier list. So this is the latest in the series of tier lists that we're doing in the run-up to ADCC and CJI, where we're going to preview every male and female division in both events. So in this episode, it's the turn of the big boys in the ADCC. Interestingly, perhaps most notably, there's no Gordon Ryan in this division. At one time, it looked like he was going to do it, as well as a super fight against Yuri Simoes. But as it stands, Gordon is going to do a super fight against Felipe Pena, who's in this division, and the super fight with Yuri. So first off, Calum. And by the way, that's Calum, and I'm Ross, and this is the Jiu Jitsu Oracle. Like and subscribe, and leave comments as we go through this, if you can. What do you make of Gordon's absence in this division?
Well, there's a lot of absences in this division. It's a bit of a mass exodus from Gordon deciding he's just going to do the super fights and then people moving over to the over ADCC. But it makes it interesting and difficult to rank people, and I think it would have been even more interesting actually with Gordon in it, because I think given the fact that if Gordon was in the division, the likelihood of someone else beating him would have been like minuscule. So I think there would have been quite a big gap between having him in S tier and then probably nobody even in A tier, to be honest, because there's nobody really in that division that's likely to beat him. So there maybe would have been like a gap to A tier and then just B tier guys. And then we've got some really big hitters like Victor Hugo, João Gabriel Rocha, and Nick Rodriguez moving over to CGI over 80 kilos as well. So definitely wide open, I would say this division is, and it makes it quite interesting to rank a lot of these guys.
Okay, so for those tuning into the tier list for the first time, we have set criteria that we're going to put each grappler into. S tier's at the top. That's where Gordon would have been if he was in the division, and that's where people we think are among the favourites to win. So you might get one, you might get a couple, or no more than like 2 or 3 max probably in a division in S tier, but possibly only one most of the time. Then we've got A tier, which is a decent to good chance to win on the day. So these are guys that we don't think are nailed on as favourites to maybe get to the final, but we think they've got a good shot at it. Then B is the dark horse tier, where we think if the stars align for these grapplers on the day, they have potential to go all the way, but it's an outside bet. After that comes C tier, which we class as disruptors, and they're guys that can throw grenades into the division, maybe take out big names. We don't really see them being able to win 4 matches on the bounce to take the title. And then D is unproven. So these are guys that we've not seen compete or haven't been able to get some wins at this absolute elite level of the sport. It's absolutely no slight on guys to be in the unproven tier. We just don't think we've seen enough of them to put them in as a disruptor or a dark horse. So, first name out of the gate for the division, and it's an interesting name to talk about. Vinny Magalhaes. Calum, give me your initial thoughts on Vinny, please.
Yeah, so obviously Vinny's won ADCC before, and then that's probably not even his biggest accomplishment. His biggest accomplishment is probably beating Gordon Ryan back in 2018, I believe. He does a lot of MMA these days, and recently, if you look at his record, the past few years, it's not the best. Last ADCC, he got injured against John Hansen, to be fair, so you can't really count that here or there. And then in 2020, he had a couple losses, one to Craig Jones, which I think we all remember when he got his leg torn up, and then one to Mason Fowler in EBI overtime. So obviously big names, not the most shame in losing to. He's obviously got that win against Gordon in his back pocket. He's obviously got the former ADCC title. As of late, it's hard to kind of rank him, but it's also the fact that this division is so wide open, and given his name value and the previous title, he's probably going to get a relatively high seed in, and he's probably going to get a match against one of these guys that's been invited recently that hasn't won trials and is quite unproven. So it sounds a bit crazy to say, just given like his lack of wins in the past few years, but I think actually possibly B tier for him?
I initially suggested B tier, and to be fair, Calum was thinking, B tier, do we not put Vinny C tier? And I said, well, hear me out on this, right? So first of all, criteria we go by, accolades. So they really count. So Vinny, and this shows how long I've been grappling for. I was there in 2011 when Vinny won the ADCC title in Nottingham in the UK. So it's been a while since Vinny took the crown. He's also got an IBJJF Nogi title to his name, which happened even before he won the ADCC, which shows how long he's been around. But accolades really count, right? Now, what makes some other criteria hard to judge Vinny by is form and strength of schedule, because he's been really sort of absent from the elite grappling scene for a long time. Like, we've seen him pop up here and there, but it's hard to like judge his form. And to be fair, like some of those losses you're talking about, like to Craig and Mason, there's like no slight losing to those guys. I mean, they're guys that could win divisions at an ADCC level. So we really don't know how Vinny's going to fare against some of the guys he's going to come up against in this division. Now, I think with the older grapplers, there's certainly a time when they might go from being an A tier or even B tier into like a disruptor phase of their career. So they're like an old, wily veteran. They could still blow up the bracket a bit with a couple of wins, but we think it's unlikely that they're going to go all the way. But I think with Vinny, the thing is like this division has been so shaken up by the exodus of guys to the Craig Jones Invitational and Gordon not being there. It is going to be bottom heavy in terms of disruptors and unproven grapplers. And then it's like, well, if Vinny gets a high seed and he gets a D tier guy in the first round, can he win? Well, I would think so. And then once he wins that first one and he gets up and running and we see how the bracket opens up, I mean, I think he's got potential to like string a couple of wins together. Do I think he's going to go all the way? No. Do I think he's got like a bigger than 0% chance of like getting to the final and then things can happen? Yes. Could he make matches like dull? Could he use his experience to get by guys? Possibly. Is he hard to submit? Yeah, I mean, he doesn't like tapping. We saw that against Craig Jones. So I think Vinny is a really hard one to rank. Now, if you're watching this and thinking, like, this is absolute madness, those guys putting Vinny in the B tier right now, like, he's no way a dark horse to win, let us know in the comments. But I'm trying to give you some reasons as to, like, why, using our criteria, that's where we're going to slot him. So, Calum is probably like less convinced than I am that Vinny should be B tier, but we're going to say he's a dark horse to string some wins together in this division.
Yeah, I think the state of the division is important to take into consideration as well, just like how many big names have moved over and how many guys they've had to fill up the division with that haven't won trials, so that's a big factor as well.
Absolutely, and for those watching our tier list, the tier lists are always done in the context of the division. So I think like in the under 80 CJI division, we had some comments like, how can you place someone that low? And it's like, well, in the context of 16 of the absolute best grapplers in the world coming together in a really deep division, then some guys are going to have to be in disruptor tier. But like on another day in another comp, they could be dark horses, decent to good, or even S, you know, depending on where the comp is. So yeah, I think like the context of the division always has to be taken into account. All right, let's move on to someone we know well, Mark McQueen. Give us your thoughts on Mark, Calum.
Yeah, so Mark's a friend of ours. He's my strength and conditioning coach. He's a former training partner of ours. We've trained with him. We know how good he is, but because we're ranking this objectively and we're ranking off of what these guys have done, Mark's obviously won trials, which will put him ahead of a lot of guys in this division in my eyes, because a lot of guys have been invited recently that didn't win trials to fill up the division. So Mark winning trials is massive, but if we're looking at what he's done against the level of guys in this division, he's only had one match, I think, against the guy in this division that was Big Dan, and he lost that match. So I think Mark can do very well in this competition. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him go relatively far, especially given the way the division shaked out recently. But we're having to do this objectively based off of what these guys have done. So I think we have to put him in that unproven tier, but I'm definitely going to have him high up in that tier.
I think Mark is not the only grappler who we're going to put in the unproven tier who you could absolutely make an argument that they're disruptors.
Yeah.
We have our first-hand experience of training with Mark and seeing him compete, and we know what he can do. But I think just because our criteria is unproven for D, then Mark gets slotted in there. What I will say is, I saw a seeding prediction by someone for this division, and they had Mark at 10, I believe. Now, once we get to the end of this episode, you'll see that Mark could be roundabout there. Like, I don't think he's going to be like 15 or 16 seed, right? Because he won Euro. So that's going to place him higher than some of these guys who've only got like silver or bronze at trials. And then like with Gordon pulling out, Victor Hugo not there, Nicky Rod. Originally, when we were talking about Mark qualifying and how excited we all were for it to happen, we thought, oh, maybe Mark's going to get like a Gordon or a Nicky Rod or a Victor Hugo in the first round. But as those guys have fell away, and as Mark's standing as it probably increased in comparison to the other grapplers in the division, I think Mark, could get a higher seed than he would have done a few months ago. And then, like, does he have the potential to win a match against someone who might be, like, 7th seed? Then, yeah, absolutely. So I think, like, if Mark, given that Scotland's never had someone qualify for the ADCC, to then have someone win a match at the ADCC would absolutely be amazing. And I think Mark has potential to, like, win match, hopefully 2, maybe more. But for our criteria, I think unproven. So, Haitham Rida, one of the most exciting grapplers in the division, all action. What do you think about his chances, Calum?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one as well. I think the only thing keeping his head above water from D tier is that armbar win over Cyborg at the last ADCC. He's got some good wins previous to that, but like if you look at his record since then, there's a lot of losses. There's good names, to be fair. Like there's Kynan, Mason Fowler, Felipe Pena, Traxor, Patrick Gaudio, Luke Griffith. So like big name after big name. But I think in his last 9 matches, he's lost 8 and drawn 1. Obviously against big names. So you would think possibly D tier, but I just think he's very dangerous. He's very athletic, and he showed in that match against Cyborg at the last ADCC that he could be a potential disruptor. Cyborg was quite a big name in that division, had potential to go quite far. So I think just riding off of that, especially because that was at the last ADCC Worlds, he showed what he could do at that level of competition. I think that's keeping his head above water from being in D tier. He's not completely unproven. He's shown he can beat guys like that. So I would be looking at C tier disruptor.
Is he still training with B team?
Yes.
So he's in a good room as well.
Yeah.
With a real focus towards this competition, and also with the likes of, competitors like Nicky Rod, who isn't in the division, but is training there. So he'll be getting plenty of good prep before going here. But yeah, that moment in 2022, probably one of the highlights of the last ADCC, the submission over Cyborg. But Haitham tends to go against really, really good grapplers. Like, I think promoters get him in against good grapplers because they know they're going to get exciting matches, exciting moments, but he hasn't been able to get the wins against those guys. But again, like this division, he could well get a match against someone who's not of the same caliber as the likes of Kynan. So, yeah, be interesting to see Haitham against someone like not at that absolute elite level for starters. And then, yeah, he's always got the potential with like, wild attacks to take someone down. So, yeah, Haitham, I agree, disruptor. Mike Perez.
Mike is another interesting one because he is someone that we typically see competing at the 77 kilo division for ADCC, and then even in IBJJF competitions, I've seen him compete at no-gi lightweight, which is 73.5 kilograms. So that's like pretty small even for a 77 guy. You know, most of the 77 guys are actually cutting down from the middleweight IBJJF weight class, but he decided at trials to do the over 99, and he won the division. Fair play to him. I think as far as resume, like, he's got a pretty good resume for this division. It's just he's probably going to struggle with the size difference. So I think just given how much of a veteran he is, I would be looking in C tier. He's proven he can beat these big guys, and he's got some big names in his resume, but I think putting him above C, just given the size of these guys, and like, I wouldn't put him past them to take out one or two, but it's very, very tiring when you're having to face guys of that size discrepancy over and over again. So I think that will be a big factor in him getting quite far into the competition, but I could see him pulling a Lachlan Giles and heel hooking some of these bigger guys in one or two matches.
Yeah, the names he's beaten at this weight in this division, Brandon Reed, Damon Ramos, Vince Pizzuto, we'll come on to talk about those guys. But it's fair to say that they're probably not going to place at the higher end here. So it'll be interesting to see like where Mike seeds and who he gets. Because he's won a trials, and because it's a trials that's held in good standing, the West Coast trials, he could seed pretty well. So I think he definitely can get a winnable match in the first round, and then thereafter we need to see like how the bracket shakes out. But yeah, good point on the endurance though. Very difficult for like a smaller guy to just keep going up against these big guys, especially as the skill level of the big guys increases as well. But I think Disruptor is a fair shout. Okay, Josh Saunders. What do you think of it?
Yeah, so I kind of view Josh as the Australian version of Mark McQueen, both big athletic guys that were really good in another sport, and then within a few years got to a really high level of grappling and then won their respective trials. So I think he had Felipe first round of last ADCC, if I'm not mistaken, lost to Felipe. He competes quite a lot, but I think as far as the guys in this division, I don't know how many wins he's got against these kind of guys. I don't think he's really got any against this level of competition. He obviously had the match recently against Gordon, and he lost that. But yeah, I would be looking at D-tier Disruptor for him as well. I think he's got a lot of potential, and again, same as Mark, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him win one or two matches or go quite far, but just for their own criteria, I think Unproven is going to be the right tier for him.
Yeah, I think my ear picked up that you said D-tier Disruptor like Mark, and I think like that's actually like a fair shout in terms of like D-tier Unproven, but potential Disruptor like Mark.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Disruptor in the making, potentially.
Yeah, potential Disruptor, definitely. That Felipe match, we saw a nice Uchimata in it, so he's got skills on the feet. And then I thought his guard play against Gordon was quite good.
Yeah.
So he's well-rounded, but at the absolute elite level, although he's gone against those guys, unproven in terms of like being able to get wins at that level. So, but yeah, I think he's definitely got potential to win though. But I just think to win a match, maybe two matches, but yeah, going all the way, unlikely just now. Now, here's another guy that we don't see loads of on the elite grappling scene. Mansour Makhmanov, right? Calum, he won the Asia Trials 2.
Yeah.
Where'd you rank him on our tier list?
Yeah, so he did win trials, so that's like a plus for him. But then again, it's like a trials that aren't ranked potentially the highest compared to some of the other ones, especially compared to like American and South American trials. Again, this division is like opened up, so he has the potential to possibly do well, but I do think he is very much unproven against the kind of guys in this division, especially coming from that part of the world. We've not really seen him perform against these kind of guys and what he's capable of against these guys. So I think clear unproven for him.
Definitely unproven. Just to talk about why I think he might be a potential problem for some people is he's very good off his back and he has good submission attacks from being on his back. Now, this division's wrestler heavy. I'm not that aware of his wrestling. Like, all the highlights I've seen of him, I've been playing off his back, basically. So what I'd say is, like, I don't know if he's got the wrestling potential to take people down, but I do know that if he's taken down or he chooses to go down, like, he has got good subs from bottom position, which isn't like something that you see wide across this division. So he could be a threat to take out guys who like want to play top against him. In the trials, he hit a label lock, which pro wrestling fans will know is an omoplata with a crossface, popularized most recently by Bryan Danielson. So if you've not seen that submission, super impressive finish. He's also like not shy about going into the legs. So I think, yeah, he is a threat, but just at this level of competition, unproven. Okay, here's a name everyone will know. Big Dan Manasoiu. What do you think about Big Dan's chances here, Calum?
So comparing this to our last tier list video, 8-8, he gives me very much Jacob Couch vibes, so we put Jacob in B tier. I think Dan is quite inconsistent, but also capable of beating very good guys, like you mentioned with the last guy we ranked. Very good off his back, and I think for this division as well, because it is so like top focused, that might give guys some issues. He's absolutely massive. He's probably the weight wise biggest guy in this division, so he's got the physicality. He can play guard like a little guy. He's quite inconsistent as well, so I think B tier dark horse is like very, very fitting for Dan.
I think as well, what causes Dan a problem is that he's going to face teammate Luke Griffith early doors.
Yeah.
So that has to be taken into consideration when you think about Dan's chances of winning the division. I think that also means that we're going to put him as a dark horse rather than someone with a decent to good chance, because we'll come on to speak about Luke later, but it'll be no surprise to know that we rate Luke pretty highly. So it's going to be a very tough test for Dan early doors, one that other guys in this division will not have to face. I like the contrast in Dan's game that you bring up is really interesting, because like he loves going into the legs from bottom and playing like that, but on top he just loves smothering people.
Yeah.
But like you've got these two extremes in his game. It's like little guy going in for the legs, top guy smothering people. But yeah, East Coast Trials winner, I believe, to make it to this ADCC. But so that will give him like a decent enough seed. But yeah, he's going to run into Luke early doors, and I think that's going to make it challenging for him. Anything else on Big Dan?
No.
So we have Big Dan as a dark horse. Okay, here's one of the guys that's been called up recently, Vince Pizzuto.
Yeah, so I don't know the most about Vince. I've watched some of his matches at trials, but again, like with these guys that have been called in recently to fill out the division, they're probably all going to be in this D tier, unproven tier. Guys that a lot of them haven't won trials, so and then also are quite new in this sort of like level and haven't really proven themselves. So I think D tier unproven for him is a very fair category.
Yeah, watching his trials, I will say that he's not shy about wrestling up from the ground. So if you get him down, like he's a threat to come back up on the top position against you. I think it would be like a cliche because they're teammates. I wrote down that maybe he's like a less athletic Nicky Rod, because he had good wrestling up, and then when I saw him on top, he was playing body locks and stuff like that to pass. But I just think it was maybe like too much of a cliche to say that he was like a less athletic Nicky Rod. But you could definitely, I think, see like vibes, you know what I mean? Because obviously they train together at B team. But yeah, given that he got silver at West Coast Trials, he did beat John Hansen, I think. But given that he got silver, I think it's like a big ask for him to come in and win matches at the World Championships. So yeah, definitely unproven at this level as well. So another in D tier. Brandon Reed, he's a name that people might know of. Got a good presence online. What do you think of him?
Yeah, another guy that has been called up recently to fill out the division. I believe he got bronze in one of the American trials. Got a good social media following. He's quite a good wrestler, and he puts out a lot of wrestling for Jiu Jitsu content, so he's quite well known. But yeah, definitely unproven at this level in straight up grappling. I think that's a fair place to put him, given the fact that I think his best accomplishment is getting bronze at trials, and then usually that wouldn't be enough to get into a division. And we're seeing a lot of these guys in that division, so I think unproven for this sort of level.
Yeah, I mean, grappling credentials, our American listeners and viewers can perhaps enlighten me more about this, but Brandon does have wrestling titles to his name, national wrestling titles, but I believe it's NAIA, which is for smaller colleges in the US and not NCAA, which is the big schools. Don't know quite how it shakes out in comparison. Like, I'd read some stuff that might be like relatable to Division 2 or Division 3, but it's definitely not comparable to like D1 level. So if anyone can let us know more about that, please give us a comment. But yeah, he's obviously got like a wrestling background. So likes being on his feet, and I've seen him in trials, like, you know, very comfortable in top position. But I think he's going to get asked like quite a lot of questions by some of these guys that have like got a lot of experience, and I don't know if like we've seen the all-around game from him that he's going to have the answers. Definitely, like, if you can keep it on the feet and make it just a takedown battle, then definitely a threat. But yeah, very unproven at this world champ level. Moving on to a guy who's absolutely not unproven at this level. How about that for a segue? Felipe Pena. How do you rank his chances?
Yeah, so people might think S tier for Felipe, but I think just given his recent performances, maybe bump him down a little bit. I would be thinking A tier for him. So to be fair, if you look at his last few matches over the past few years, it's a similar situation to some of these guys, where it is against very high level competition. So he's got a win against Lovato, who is in the weight class below, but is definitely like upper echelons of these kind of divisions. Lost to Magalhaes, a win by submission to Heisem, who's in this division, a loss in overtime to Craig Jones, a win in a decision over Nicky Rod, who, if in this division, might have been S tier, if not A tier. A win over Roberto Jimenez, Max Jimenez, Josh Saunders at the last ADCC, Wagner Hosha. So some good wins, and then some losses to the likes of Gordon, Ty Rotolo, Magalhaes as well. So I think just given the level of the names he lost to, it's like, doesn't knock him down a huge peg, but I think the lack of consistency maybe in some of his performances, I'd be reluctant to put him in S tier, so I think A tier for Felipe is fair.
Yeah, I just think on that S tier v A tier thing, we take into account form and strength of schedule. Now, his strength of schedule is like good. He's always up against like good grapplers, good names, but his form's very inconsistent. It's like win, lose. So, but I think in this division, it'll be different because he's up against guys who's like way more seasoned than, way more experienced than, and probably way more skilled than. But it's now 2017 since Felipe won the ADCC. So 7 years ago. At that time, you know, and the times like he beat Gordon, you know, he was pretty much seen as like the best, or certainly like right at the upper end of heavier grapplers, gi and no gi. But yeah, over time, probably as like other guys have got more skilled and that the divisions got deeper, and then as he's got a bit older, then we've seen him find it harder to rack up long win runs. So I think in this division, like, he's got to be one of the favourites. when you look at the strength of competition. But just that inconsistency makes me question whether, like, you know, he'll be able to string 4 wins together. I know on Felipe in this event, he's going for what would be a first time ever achievement, someone winning 3 golds. He's going to go for his weight class. It's said he's going to go and do the absolute thereafter. And then he's got his super fight against Gordon, which there's a gold medal up for grabs, even although it's not going to be recognised by Calum, because it's not a super fight that's come about in the traditional way that super fights come about, where the winner of the last absolute takes on the reigning super fight champion. This is just a match that's been created out of nothing, and they're putting a medal on the line, which I think is making Gordon happy that he can win another medal. But it's not making Calum happy because he's not recognising it. So, yes, tough weekend for Felipe as well. A lot of matches potentially. But yeah, I don't think like he's just like an absolute nailed-on favourite. So we're going for A. Hiki Jesua, someone we've seen a bit on the European scene. Calum, enlighten me as to his chances in this division.
Yeah, so he had Gordon first round. The last ADCC Worlds, obviously lost that match. He has got a good skill set. He's good on the feet. He's big. He's athletic. I think biggest win for him is over Big Dan, who we've got in B tier. So he's definitely not unproven at this level. He's definitely shown that he can put together some wins and win some matches. He's got some losses as well to guys in this division. So I think C tier disruptor would be very fair for Hiki.
Yeah, I've got some notes on Hiki. Savvy, forces mistakes out of his opponent, bit of a grinder, you know, loves being on the feet. I think he's going to be like a tough nut to crack. I can definitely see him being in some long matches in this division against guys who like also want to wrestle. And he's probably got the experience to get the edge in the submission grappling setting against a lot of these guys. But I think it's going to be a challenge for him to string a few wins together. But like I could definitely see him like taking out 1 or 2 people along the way, you know, just with the way he plays. Yeah, I note on that, just because someone has a victory over someone else in a higher tier doesn't mean that we're going to bump them up a tier necessarily. Like we're taking each person in the round, in the context of the division, based on like their credentials, weighing them up against other grapplers. But you can have a win over someone, but it doesn't mean that your status moves from like disruptor to.
It would be impossible to do the tiers otherwise, because everyone's got wins over everyone.
Yeah. So we don't think Hiki's a dark horse to win it all. We do think Big Dan's a dark horse to win it all. Particularly like if he beats Luke Griffith, maybe he goes up from dark horse to win it all. But yeah, Hiki we think is a disruptor. We're going all over the world right now. Let's go to Victor Honorio in a totally different part of the globe than Hiki. So, Calum, Victor Honorio, massive top pressure, big unit. What do you think his chances of winning?
Yeah, so he's coming from winning the South American trials, which is quite commendable. Good achievement coming into this, especially given some of the other guys in this division. He's not a guy that's done like a bunch of like no-gi outside of that, but he is a massive veteran just in jiu-jitsu in general. Like if you look at his BJJ heroes, like he's very consistent and very often competing at a very high level. So absolute veteran, and we saw that in his performances at trials. He was very good at shutting people down and getting people into his game. Good tight passing, good wrestling. So I think C tier disruptor would be a good place for him. Like I say, you could argue unproven just in the fact that maybe against some of these guys in this division, but if you look at grappling as a whole and what he's done in the gi, depends how much you want to weigh that. But I just think he's a big veteran and he's faced a lot of guys on this sort of level. So I think C tier disruptor would be fair for Victor.
I think Victor, like, maybe there's guys in this division who are better wrestlers, but I don't necessarily know they'll be able to take him down. But I think one thing Victor has over a lot of these guys is guard passing. I think his guard passing is going to be way better. His top game is going to be way better than a lot of people in this division. It's a question of can he get there. But I think for a lot of the wrestlers in this division, their actual like jiu-jitsu on the mat won't be as strong as their wrestling. I think with Victor, like his wrestling's like good enough for him to hold his own against those guys. And if he does get into the ground, like his top pressure and his passing is just going to be able to get him past the legs to dominant positions. But it's just going to be a question of like whether he can get there. If he does, I can see him winning some matches. If he doesn't, then I could see him like, losing on the feet. Yeah, definitely a disruptor. Damon Ramos, another guy who's been called in recently. What do you think of his chances?
Yes, I don't know the most about this guy, I'm not going to lie, but I think he clearly falls into the same category as a few of the other guys that we've mentioned. Been called up to fill out the division. He's obviously a world-class grappler, but at the end of the day, against the level of guys in this competition, especially given the seeding he's likely to get, he's definitely unproven in winning matches at this level.
Yeah, so from what I've got, I think he's got 2 silvers at trials and maybe a 4th place as well. So definitely like a threat to win trials, but maybe not a threat to win a world championships. What I will say is like of the guys who've been called in, I think he's probably more well-rounded than a lot of them. He's got a good wrestling background and he's done some MMA as well, but I think his jiu-jitsu that I've seen is like decently well-rounded. So if he is on his back or whatever, then he's going to be still in the game. It's not just about being all on the feet. But yeah, I think definitely like unproven at this level, and it's going to be a challenge for him to pick up a win or a couple of wins, particularly because he should be seeded relatively low in the division. Now, someone with some more credentials to their name, and someone whose name might be well known to jiu-jitsu fans, Roosevelt Souza. Calum, give us your thoughts on Roosevelt, please.
Yeah, so Roosevelt, another guy that competes a lot and very consistently, bit of a veteran at this point. At the last ADCC, he got 2 matches deep. He got a knee bar against João Gabriel Rocha, which is very impressive considering the standard of João Gabriel, and then he won against Haisam Rita, who's in this division, by 2 points before losing to Gordon in the 3rd round. He's competed in a lot of other competitions, got some good respectable wins against some guys. I think he's got another win against Haisam, win against Devontae Johnson, who's like ADCC caliber, I would say. Also got some losses, but against some pretty good guys. So I think given his skill set, I think B tier would be fair for him. I could definitely see him going very far in this division and doing well, but definitely not cracking A tier for me.
No, I wouldn't say go as high as A. I think at the last ADCC he picked up bronze because Pena forfeited the 3rd, 4th match.
You've seen here a choke win against Heike Jessler as well, so it's definitely proven to beat a lot of guys in this division.
Yeah, so like with that bronze medal, he should be seeded high. I think he's also got a Nogi world title to his name as well. So IBJJF. So, and then he had a great run at the Brazilian trials to qualify. So, he had a great run at the Brazilian trials in 2022 to qualify for the previous ADCC, and then he's got an invite this time around. So, yeah. Definitely like showing that he's like capable of winning at this level though. So a dark horse in this division, particularly where there's a lot of guys who are not seasoned at this level. Right, 2 grapplers left. First we'll go to John Hansen. John's been on the scene for a long, long time. So Calum, what do you think about his chances in the ADCC 2024?
Yeah, so John Hansen has won trials multiple times and competed at ADCC quite a few times, been on the scene for quite a while as well. Didn't manage to win trials this year. However, I just think given his veteran status and what he's done against a lot of these caliber of competitors, I think C tier would be pretty fair for him. I could definitely see him getting a middle of the road, if not slightly high seeding potentially, and then I can definitely see him beating some of the guys that have been invited recently, even though he didn't win trials, as I said. So I think you could make an argument for D tier for him given recent performances, but I think holistically looking at his career the past few years, C tier would be quite fair for John.
Yeah. Now, I think he has an IBJJF Nogi world title to his name, 2017. I will say that Nogi title, like we've mentioned it a couple of times on this chat, but it doesn't rate as highly as an ADCC or a CJI now, but it is still a good accomplishment to have on your record. Yeah, and like really well versed in the ADCC rule set, having competed loads of times in the trials and done well. Another thing that like he has in the mix against some of these guys is like he's a huge submission threat. So some of the wrestlers, you know, maybe like their submissions are more limited to like head and arm chokes from the top. John Hansen, you know, he's a threat from multiple places to finish the match. So I think that plays into his favor. So while like his recent forms not being as strong, like just that threat and his track record and his over his career and his experience, I think definitely puts him in to the disruptor tier. And we have one guy left, and those who are following on YouTube will see that there's no one yet in the S tier. And those who are listening along, hopefully you've been able to track our ratings along the way. But just a reminder that we placed Felipe Pena in A tier, so he's currently leading the tier list. So Luke Griffith, someone who's coming into this division from the under 99 category. He's moved up as Gordon's dropped out, one of his teammates at New Wave. I think we should place Luke Griffith, Calum.
So before one of his most recent wins, I probably would have had him in B tier. Looking at his resume against ADCC caliber opponents, submission win over Owen Livesey, submission win over Haisam Rita, submission win over Santeri Ilias. We've got a submission win over Roosevelt Souza, who we've got in B tier, so some pretty good wins there. Problem with Luke is he can be quite inconsistent. He lost a match on Aiga against someone that was completely unknown. He lost a recent match against Wagner Hocha, who is in a division below him. So I would have been looking at B tier had it not been for a very dominant submission win over Kynan Duarte recently. So I think that, for me, definitely bumps him up. Kynan's won the last two ADCCs in the divisions that he's done for his weight class, so to completely dominate a guy like that and get a submission win over him, I think bumps him up to A tier for me, especially given how this division's looking at this moment in time.
So I have seen people have Luke as their favourite to win, and I think that's entirely justified to have Luke as a favourite to win, but to put him in S tier, you have to be like a nailed on favourite to win or get to the final, and I don't think he's quite there yet, as Calum's outlined with his record. He is very, very well rounded. He is very, very experienced competing at, like, against these elite guys, and he has shown in beating the likes of Kynan that he can like beat guys at the very top end of the sport. But I don't know, like Luke. I'm not taking anything away from the win by Wagner against Luke, but it was a big surprise to me that like Wagner won that match. So I don't know if like Luke didn't perform at his best for a reason, or whether it was just how well Wagner played against them. But when I see a result like that, which although Wagner's like been in the game a long time and is a threat to beat people, like I would have expected Luke to win that match at this stage of his career, and
especially given that Wagner's competing in 3 weight classes below Luke, the ADCC. So Wagner in this ADCC did 77, You've got 88 under 99 and then over 99, which is what Luke's doing. So that's like a big thing to take into consideration with that match as well.
And then we've mentioned it before, like, you know, obviously I've picked up on the chat that like we're favouring Luke to beat Big Dan when they square off, but like Luke's gonna get a tough match, even if he is like seeded high. He's gonna get a tough match, probably second round against Big Dan. So again, like I don't think
that could go either way. I would probably say 60-40 towards Luke at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Big Dan comes out of that match with him.
Yeah, I think it's entirely justified for people to have Luke as a favourite to win. If you want to, if you're into betting and that's who you've put your money on, then you can absolutely reason for that. But I think like we can't put him in S. And as Calum says, like maybe not that long ago we had Luke as a dark horse. As the divisions opened up a little bit, like now we're going to put him in A tier. Just a stat to show his well-roundedness and his threat. I mean, you know, he's people know that he's good on the feet, but I think in 2023, 88 matches, and he went 82-1. The one loss was a Yiga match that Calum referenced, and the 82 wins were by submission. Now, he was at brown belt level, so not the same as like this elite level that of the World Championship, but still like a tremendous record, and that finishing potential is huge in this division against guys who, some of whom I don't think have as high a finishing potential. So Luke in with a decent to good chance to take the crown alongside Felipe Pena, but we don't have anyone in S tier. So let us know what you think about that. Should we have put anyone there? Do you have anyone there? Leave your comments. We always enjoy reading them on YouTube. But as for now, that concludes the plus 99 division tier list for the ADCC, and the Jiu Jitsu Oracle will be back with another tier list for ADCC or CJI in the very near future. Make sure you subscribe to our feeds and you'll get a notification when it drops.